At 8:13 on a rain-dark Monday in April, 5 contractors in navy field jackets stood beneath the cracked limestone pediment of 47 Mercer Lane, and the house behind them had already been sentenced. Olivia Bennett, 32 and newly elevated to Director of Code Compliance, held a thin clipboard and listened while each contractor delivered the same conclusion. West wall failure, foundation movement, full condemnation. Erin Hale arrived through the side gate in a waxed canvas jacket, darkened at the shoulders by rain, her boots ringed with dried mortar dust that no weather ever seemed to remove, a 6-year-old girl at her side holding a white stuffed cat. Erin looked once at the crack above the portico, once at the downspout draining straight into the planting bed, and then at the line item the others had missed in the packet. Olivia did not ask what she had seen. She glanced at the child, at the jacket, at the cheap folder under Erin's arm, and said, with the bored finality of an office stamp, "Then it isn't a house, it's a liability." Erin did not argue. She did not flinch. She simply took back her unsigned permit inquiry, nodded once, and walked Luna toward the street. One of the contractors, enjoying the audience more than the joke, said, "If she buys it, somebody bring folding chairs for the collapse." 89 days later, when the wire for $1.8 million cleared, and the only structure on Mercer Lane still standing true was the one they had, called dead, Olivia Bennett was standing in slurry at the edge of her halted project, staring at a hillside that had begun to move exactly where Erin Hale had said it would. The woman they had mistaken for a sentimental nuisance would become the only one who knew how to keep the rest of the block from following it downhill. Before we dive further, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please share it with your beloved ones and subscribe to this channel. At 5:41 that same morning, before Mercer Lane and the contractors, and the sentence pronounced in the rain, the kitchen in Erin Hale's rented duplex held exactly 2 mugs, 3 sharpened carpenter's pencils, and a row of permit binders on the shelf where most people kept cookbooks. Erin was 34, a builder whose real mastery was structural rehabilitation sequencing, the art of deciding what could move, what could wait, and what would take the whole building down if touched in the wrong order. She spread photocopied plans across the table, weighted the curling corners with a salt cellar and Luna's library book, and drew one clean mark beside the entry for stormwater routing. The report said catastrophic settlement. The photographs said water. Those were different languages. She was still looking at the ink when Luna came in wearing one sock inside out, hair folded to one side from sleep, clover hanging by the gray ear from her hand. "School shoes," Erin said. Luna stood on one foot and squinted at the plans. "Is that the broken house?" "Yes. Can I come until drop-off?" That was how most of Erin's mornings worked now, by mathematics more than design. Erin had learned to run a life on substitutions. She packed peanut butter crackers into a wax paper sleeve, poured coffee into one mug and orange juice into a plastic cup, and tucked a brass folding rule into the back pocket of her binder. It had belonged to her father, who had spent 42 years pouring footings, laying block, and telling her one sentence whenever she rushed a measurement, because money or weather wanted her to rush it. Houses tell the truth if you ask them the same question twice. He had said it often enough that the sentence no longer sounded like language. It sounded like alignment. Graybridge had been built in layers that resented one another, and the city department Olivia Bennett ran was supposed to keep those layers from damaging each other. In 8 months, she had turned missed inspection targets into clean charts and earned the kind of profile that used phrases like decisive modernizer. Competence can resemble wisdom from a distance. At 7:58, she stepped from a black city sedan in heels sensible enough for optics and not sensible enough for wet soil, accepted the packet from Hunter Voss, her deputy director for emergency actions, and began the walkthrough without asking who else had requested access. Hunter, who wore expensive field boots with soles too clean to be useful, had arranged the 5-contractor assessment in 48 hours and presented the speed itself as proof of excellence. He understood the politics of urgency. He did not yet understand that urgency makes a poor witness. Mara Lynn was already there, standing beneath the eaves with rain beating on the shoulders of her charcoal coat. A deputy plans examiner, whose specialty was historic preservation review and whose authority was real enough to delay any project in the district by 6 weeks if she chose. She was 31, deliberate, with the kind of stillness that made most people talk too much near her. When Aaron first stepped onto the porch, Mara looked at the work jacket, Luna with Clover tucked under her chin, and then at Aaron's hands, short-nailed and scarred from lath and sheet metal. Aaron crouched without introducing herself, touched the crack above the left pilaster, pressed a fingernail through the flaking paint, and scraped away a thread of efflorescence so thin most people would have mistaken it for dust. Then she stood, moved 3 feet to the right, and looked up at the gutter joint that dumped roof water directly along the brick return. One of the contractors said, "You won't fix 9,000 feet with a fingernail." Aaron said nothing. Mara's hand had found the porch rail at some point without her noticing. Inside, the house smelled of damp plaster, mouse droppings, and old cedar. The foyer rose through carved oak and stained glass gone pale behind grime. The west wall did lean. The staircase did sag. The rear conservatory had separated from the main structure by 1.84 inches at the crown. Every visual cue supported the verdict already hardening in Olivia's packet. But houses tell the truth in sequence. Aaron looked where sequence would show itself first, not at the dramatic cracks, but at the baseboard miters, the window reveals, the door that still latched at the butler's pantry, though the frame above it had split. She took the brass folding rule from her binder, opened it to exactly 14 inches, and placed it against the plaster seam beside the pantry. Her thumb paused. The seam was dirty on both edges. No fresh gypsum, no recent grind, dormant. She crossed to the mudroom, knelt by a cast-iron floor drain, and lifted a grate the others had stepped over. The smell rising from below was mineral-rich and cold, running water, not sewer. She tilted her head and listened. There it was again, a narrow intermittent rush, about every 11 seconds, too regular to be groundwater. Somewhere under Mercer Lane, storm water was still being collected and sent through a line the city maps did not show. Olivia had already moved on to the back parlor, initialing the recommendation sheet Hunter held out to her. "Emergency demolition," he said quietly. "Before the school walking route is reviewed for next fall." It sounded prudent. It also gave the city power to take the house out of standard review and package the parcel with the 2 adjacent carriage lots Bennett Development partners wanted for a 27-unit luxury project facing the harbor. Olivia did not ask why the packet included 17 photographs of cracked plaster and none of the exterior drainage conditions. "What exactly is your interest here?" Olivia asked instead. Aaron handed over a 1-page permit inquiry and a cashier's check receipt. "Purchase and stabilization." Hunter glanced at the numbers and gave a small laugh through his nose. "You're short by a few zeros." Aaron took the paper back before his wet thumb could crease it. "Not if the structure is sound." Olivia looked at the child, the rabbit, the jacket, then back at the contractor report. "Authority exercised without the willingness to listen is not strength. It is a specific and very costly kind of blindness." "Then it isn't a house," she said. "It's a liability." The formal notice was posted at 11:06 a.m. on the cedar side door in a weatherproof sleeve. "Unsafe structure, entry prohibited." After 6, demolition review set. For June 28, 8:30 a.m. That gave the house 87 days, unless an owner acquired it, filed an engineered stabilization plan, and posted a bond the city would accept. 87 days was not generous. It was possible. She took Luna to school 12 minutes late, signed the clipboard, and crouched to fix the inside-out sock at the heel. Luna held Clover against Aaron's shoulder and said, in the practical tone children use when they are trying to help without understanding scale, "You can have my tape if your house needs one." Aaron nodded as if the offer required consideration. She tucked the rabbit's gray ear straight with one finger and went back to Mercer Lane. The auction was held 3 days later in a county room with bad fluorescent tubes and 39 metal chairs, 21 occupied. Nobody wanted the house except as land. Olivia was there because the cities had an interest in any bid contingent on rehabilitation. Hunter was there because Bennett Development wanted the parcel assembled before summer. Mara was there because she had read Aaron's one-page inquiry twice after hours and could not forget the line beside stormwater routing. Aaron arrived in the same jacket, Luna in a blue cardigan beside her. Bidding opened at $182,000. Bennett Development stopped at $244. It was because demolition made more financial sense if the land remained distressed. A landlord from Bell Street stopped at $251,500. Aaron said, $258,400. The room turned. She did not look back. She did not smile. She simply placed the cashier's checks on the table in stacks clipped with silver binder clips. The county clerk counted twice. Aaron had sold the last clear asset left from her old life and borrowed the remainder from a credit union whose loan officer had said only 90 days after that, "I'm not a poet." She signed the purchase documents at 2:17. Olivia watched from the second row, one knee angled toward the aisle as if she might still stand and stop it. She did not. Hunter murmured something about tactical delay. Mara watched Aaron gather her copies, slide the folding rule into her binder, and lift Luna with one arm so the child could see the clerk's stamp, paid across the final page. On the courthouse steps, the rain had stopped. The harbor light came back in strips across the cars. Mara followed Aaron halfway to the curb before speaking. "The city won't waive the bond. I know, you have 84 days. Aaron adjusted Luna higher on her hip. "Then I'll use them." Mara looked at Clover, at the rabbit's gray ear gone flat where Luna slept against Aaron's shoulder, then at the purchase packet. "Why this one?" Aaron's answer was not an explanation. "Because they diagnosed the symptom." Mara said nothing. The corner of the stamped packet pressed deeper under her thumb. Aaron's ordinary life after that looked, from the street, smaller than the work underway inside it. She got Luna dressed at 6:03, dropped her at school by 7:18, worked Mercer Lane until pickup at 3:12, and then again from 8:41 until she could no longer trust her own measurements. Her sister Nessa covered 2 evenings a week. Money went in one direction only. The house began with trash because every rehabilitation begins with truth made visible. Aaron filled 6 30-yard dumpsters in 9 days and itemized what everyone else would have buried. 1. 26 board feet of old-growth pine salvageable after denailing. 37 brass hinge sets. 4 marble mantels. 14 radiators. 9 windows useful as patterns. She kept manuals, not novels, in a makeshift office in the library. The top left drawer held Luna's drawings and bond notices. The right held invoices and moisture readings. The first unseen proof came on day 11. The west stair hall sagged 1.38 inches over 19 feet, enough to scare buyers and justify demolition language. But the deflection line was smooth, not broken, which meant displacement rather than shear. Aaron built cribbing towers from stacked 6x6 blocks, set 4 bottle jacks beneath the carrying beam, and lifted the hall by 1/16 of an inch every 9 hours so the plaster would complain. Before the timber did, she used a laser line and a dial indicator. When a hairline crack above the landing opened by the thickness of a credit card, she stopped, backed the load off by 0.3 inches, and left it overnight. In the morning, the staircase settled into alignment. Nobody saw it except Mara, who had come unannounced to review the emergency stabilization filing, and stopped in the doorway when she understood what Aaron had been doing in the half-light. "You're lifting from the secondary carry," Mara said. Aaron checked the indicator. "Main beam's still taking weight. That's not in the packet. Neither is the drain line." Mara stepped farther in, careful where she placed her shoes between chalk marks on the floor. "Hunter says you're gambling with cosmetic salvage." "He would." Mara crouched by the opened floor. "How do you know the west wall isn't sliding?" Aaron held out the brass folding rule so Mara could see the black marks she had made at each survey point. "Because the numbers quit moving when the water did." Mara took the rule. Their hands came close enough for Aaron to notice the fine half-moon scar at Mara's wrist where a drafting knife had once gone wrong. Mara noticed the sawdust gathered in the seam of Aaron's cuff, and the steadiness with which she waited for a question instead of selling an answer. Something in Mara's attention shifted there, and then tried to pretend it had not. She returned the rule and said, "I can get you 48 hours before they re-inspect. Use them on the archive request." "For what?" "The drawings they're missing." Mara straightened. "You know there are missing drawings." Aaron wiped her hands on a rag and looked toward the mudroom drain. "I know water doesn't keep appointments by accident." Downtown, Olivia Bennett had built her reputation by removing lag, and lag was exactly what Aaron Hale had reintroduced. Emergency demolition became conditional demolition. Conditional demolition required hearings. Hearings alerted neighbors. Neighbors alerted the Preservation Society. Each delay cost the city money, and Bennett Development leverage on the adjacent carriage parcels. Olivia responded the way efficient people often do when their first decision is threatened, by making the second one faster. She approved a contractor recommendation for polymer grout injection along the west wall, without commissioning a full drainage survey. She accepted Hunter's assurance that archive retrieval had produced all relevant plans. She signed off on temporary trenching along the lower lot line to prepare the neighboring parcel for utility work. Even after the geotechnical subconsultant wrote in small type that unexplained subsurface water should be mapped before excavation. A staff engineer named Paul Cerna raised that line in a meeting and was told there was no time. Paul nodded because he had no independent budget authority. The grout injection held for 6 days. On the 7th, after 23 minutes of hard rain, water surfaced through a seam in the lower carriage lot and ran brown across newly poured temporary footings. Hunter called it residual saturation. Olivia repeated the phrase in a briefing. The problem looked solved. That was the false resolution the city preferred because it fit on one page. The deeper fault kept moving in the dark. By day 19, Aaron had opened the dumbwaiter chase between the pantry and the second-floor linen room because a thermal camera showed colder air there than the wall cavity justified. Inside, she found mouse nests, newspaper from 1964, and a galvanized lockbox wired to a stud. It took 3 minutes and a pry bar to get it open. Inside were 12 pages of field addenda, 3 blue-lined sheets brittle with age, and 1 memo stamped received by code compliance on August 14, 1997, then never filed into the digital archive. The addenda were signed by Elias Broder and countersigned by Roy Hale, masonry foreman. Aaron read them twice without sitting down. The west wall had never been the primary issue. Beneath Mercer Lane, running diagonally under the carriage lots and grazing the edge of 47's garden, lay a stormwater collector built after the slide to intercept hillside seepage and carry it to a stone vault near Harbor Drive. The house had been tied into a concealed grade beam lattice, anchored by 4 caissons socketed to bedrock. The crack above the portico was intentionally left as a relief joint after retrofit work. The system could tolerate roof water and surface neglect. It could not tolerate trenching across the collector line. Aaron did not celebrate. She did not swear. She simply photographed every page, placed the originals into acid-free sleeves, and called Mara. Mara answered on the second ring. "Tell me you found something. Come alone." When Mara arrived, Luna was at the library table doing subtraction on the back of an insulation invoice. Clover sat propped against a coffee can full of drill bits. Mara paused at the threshold, taking in the child beneath the chandelier wrapped in plastic, while Aaron laid out documents that could change the legal status of the block. Luna looked up. "Are you the person who says yes or no?" Mara took off her damp coat. "Sometimes." "Which one?" Mara's mouth changed before she could stop it. "I try to be the person who reads first." Luna accepted that and went back to her numbers. Mara read the addenda standing up. Then she sat. Then she read the memo stamp again. Her left hand found the edge of the table and stayed there. These were logged, yes, and buried, yes. By who? Aaron slid over the memo. The receiving initials beside the 1997 stamp matched the archived personnel signature of Ronald Voss, Hunter's father, who had supervised code records before retirement. Attached to the back was a more recent routing slip from 3 months earlier, initialed HV, requesting legacy files for Mercer assemblage review. Someone touched the documents recently and chosen not to restore them to the record. Mara looked at the initials, then at the plastic tubs of sorted hinges, then at Luna erasing a subtraction mistake with serious concentration. He knew, she said. Aaron's eyes stayed on the page. He knew enough. Mara exhaled once. If this gets filed, Olivia loses the demolition basis. If this doesn't get filed, the Hill loses the collector. That night, after Luna slept on a pile of moving blankets in the front parlor, Aaron stood alone in the kitchen with the brass folding rule open and not looking at it. Stillness was how deliberation showed itself in her. The credit union note matured in 71 days. Filing the documents would trigger a fight she did not have money for. Not filing them would mean building around a danger she understood too well. She closed the rule, set it beside the sink, and wrote 2 emails. One to the archive clerk requesting immediate formal inclusion of the 1997 addenda, copied to plans review. One to the city attorney requesting a stay on all trenching along Mercer pending subsurface survey. She sent both at 11:47. The answer came at 8:02 the next morning. No stay without current engineering validation, and no work stoppage on the basis of legacy documents discovered by a financially interested owner. Olivia had signed it. Hunter had drafted it. Mara, copied but not consulted, read the email and went straight to Olivia's office. "These aren't unverified," Mara said, laying down the scans. Olivia glanced once. "They're undocumented chain of custody materials. They're city stamped. They were not in the official record because someone removed them." Olivia's gaze shifted to Hunter, who was standing at the side credenza with a coffee he had not yet touched. "That's a serious claim. It's also the simplest one." Hunter spoke before Olivia could answer. "Even if the documents are authentic, they describe a 1997 stabilization condition. We have current contractor findings." Mara did not raise her voice. "Contractor findings that ignored the collector. We cannot run a city on hypotheticals and crawlspace discoveries." Mara looked at her a long second. "You're already running it on one." Olivia said nothing. Then she ordered an expedited independent survey. While allowing trenching to continue outside the zone Hunter's consultant had marked as low risk. It was the half measure people choose when doubt arrives late and pride is still in the room. For a week the weather held. Survey flags bloomed along Mercer Lane. Aaron reframed the conservatory roof, sistered joists under the breakfast room, and stripped paint from the front doors with an infrared heater. She sold salvage to finance new copper downspouts. She ate standing up. She slept 4 hours at a time. On day 32, she climbed into the crawl space with a sewer camera, fed the line through the cast iron drain in the mudroom, and found the collector at 43 inches below grade, running exactly where the 1997 addenda said it would, until the image met a hard obstruction that glistened new and pale in the light. Construction slurry from the lower lot trench. She backed the camera out, labeled the footage, and sent it to Mara and the city attorney with a single sentence. "The line is already compromised." At 3:12 that afternoon, Luna needed her left sneaker re-teed and could not find Clover. Aaron sat on the library floor amid dropcloths and invoices, retied the lace, found the rabbit beneath extension cords, and listened while Luna explained that Clover did not like loud scraping noises after dark. Outside, men were trenching toward the lower parcel, under a permit Olivia had not fully revoked. Aaron tucked Clover under Luna's arm and went back outside. The reckoning began at 2:16 a.m. on day 41, in rain heavy enough to turn the harbor lights into blurred pins. A temporary retaining wall on the lower carriage lot bowed inward by 2 inches in less than 4 minutes. The trench backfill liquefied. Mateo Ruiz dropped to one knee when the ground under his right leg opened, and another man hauling hose with him went down hard against rebar. The collector line, already choked, burst upstream of the obstruction and sent water laterally through fill that should never have been disturbed before mapping. Mud punched through a basement window in the occupied triplex below Mercer. 11 tenants were evacuated in slippers and raincoats. One woman had to be carried back for her medication through ankle-deep water. The human cost of bad sequence is always paid in ordinary things first. By 2:39, the emergency operations room was lit and tense. Olivia arrived with rain on the hem of her coat. Hunter was already there, distributing photocopied diagrams of the lower lot utilities. Mara stood near the screen with Aaron's sewer footage open on a laptop and did not sit down when Olivia entered. Paul Cerna had both hands flat on the table because it was the only way to keep them still. The breach followed the historic line, Mara said. Hunter answered before Olivia could. We don't know that yet. We know enough. Olivia looked at the live feed from Mercer, where red and blue lights moved through rain like broken signals. Where is Hale? No one in the room missed the name. Not Aaron. Not the woman who had spent weeks being Miss Hale only when a notice needed serving. Mara gave the answer with no emphasis at all. At the house. The formal summons came through the city attorney at 3:07. He called Aaron while she was in the mudroom, boots off, comparing the burst pattern in the collector footage with the 1997 addenda spread beside Luna, sleeping form on a mattress of folded blankets. Clover lay under the child's chin. The attorney said the city requested immediate consultation. Aaron listened without interruption. Rain hit the side windows in slanted sheets. Can you come in? He asked. Text me the survey. That was all. By 3:44, she had the city files on her phone, Luna wrapped in a red blanket in the passenger seat, and the addenda in a waterproof sleeve. She drove not downtown first, but to the lower lot, and stood in rain to watch the runoff pattern for 90 seconds before speaking. Water was surfacing in 3 places, not one. The burst at the triplex was symptom. The hill itself was loading. If the next section blew, Mercer Lane would shear and take portions of 2 occupied homes with it. Olivia crossed the mud toward her, boots sinking at each step. The city lights made her face look flatter than it had in the dry confidence of office glass. We need the system map. Aaron handed her a hard hat from the truck bed instead. Put that on. Olivia took it. Hunter arrived seconds later, already talking. Our contractor can trench from the alley and relieve pressure from the downside. Aaron shook her head once. You trench again and you cut the last intact branch. He opened his mouth. Mara, coming up behind him with survey stakes in her hand, said, Let her finish. Aaron crouched in the mud and flattened the addenda beneath a flashlight beam weighted by a brick. Her finger moved over the page with the economy of someone who had done the work in her head before anyone asked to see it. Collector runs here. 43 inches to crown at the mudroom cleanout, 57 at the carriage line because the grade drops 2.4%. Your obstruction is here. She tapped the marked trench segment. Pressure backed up through the relief seams and found the retaining fill. You don't need more opening. You need bypass and vent before daylight. What do you need? Olivia asked. Mini excavator with a narrow bucket. 2 pumps above 180 gallons a minute. 8-inch filter fabric. Washed stone. 6 men who follow instructions exactly. Hunter said, At 4 in the morning? Aaron looked up at him then, not angry, not theatrical, simply precise. At 4 in the morning is when the hill is still here. She returned quietly, because 6 families were in the church hall downhill, and because the triplex basement would fill again by dawn if no one intercepted the line. Not for the city, not for Olivia's apology, that was not yet an apology, not for permit leverage. Duty is often mistaken for softness by people who have never had to practice it under pressure. The proof sequence began at 4:12 and lasted until full light. Erin took the mini excavator herself for the first cut because nobody else trusted the map enough to place steel that close to a buried collector. She peeled back mud in layers no deeper than 3.5 inches, stopped twice to probe with an insulated rod, and exposed the crown of the line exactly where the 1997 drawing predicted. Sure here, she said, and men moved. She did not shout. She did not repeat herself. She simply pointed once and moved to the next task. A bypass trench was opened upslope and lined with filter fabric. She directed one pump to the flooded triplex inlet and a second to a temporary sump. Beside the garden wall, then had washed stone dumped in alternating lifts so pressure could bleed before the bypass pipe took flow. At 4:47, she ordered the obstruction breach from the upstream side using a hand lance instead of the machine bucket. At 4:49, muddy water punched through the ledge with enough force to jolt the coupling. "Hold it," she said. 3 men held. By 5:03, the bypass was taking flow. By 5:26, the inclinometer reading on the temporary retaining wall quit climbing. Total drop in surface water over the next 17 minutes, 61%. Olivia watched from 12 feet away under a portable light tower. She saw Aaron switch from excavation to carpentry without flourish. When the mudroom sill inside 47, Mercer began to rack under shifting lateral pressure. Aaron cut a relief notch in a sacrificial brace, set a temporary header beneath the compromised lintel, and redirected the load path into 2 jack posts resting on doubled sleepers she had milled from salvaged joists weeks earlier. That was competence in its truest form. Not improvisation exactly. Preparation that looks like instinct because the preparation itself was invisible. At 6:02, with first light thinning the rain, Olivia found Aaron in the stripped library wiping mud from the 1997 addenda with a clean rag before returning the sheets to their sleeves. Luna was still asleep on the blankets in the corner, one fist closed around Clover's gray ear. The room smelled of wet wood and coffee gone cold. Olivia said, "I should have read the file myself." Aaron kept wiping the edge of the paper. "Yes." Olivia's mouth settled, not offended, simply forced into a shape accuracy sometimes creates. Hunter requested the archive pull. "He told me nothing relevant was missing." Aaron slid the final sheet into plastic. "You signed the trench permit." A beat passed. Rain ticked softly at the boarded window. Olivia looked toward Luna and then back. "Why come back?" Aaron set the papers down square. "Because 6 families sleep downhill from your paperwork." Olivia did not answer. It was not solution. It was only the correct scale of things. Hunter Voss was placed on administrative leave by 8:14. There was no dramatic exposure, no shouted accusation in a room built for echo. The city attorney saw the routing slip, compared initials, and removed his badge access, pending investigation into record suppression and negligent omission. Hunter tried twice to frame the missing addenda as clerical ambiguity. The phrase died on contact with timestamps. Olivia signed the leave notice herself in a side office, while firefighters rolled wet hose outside. When she came back into the corridor, Paul Cerna was waiting, with revised emergency orders, already drafted. He had understood the structure of the failure from the beginning, and now, finally had authority long enough to use it. The remaining 49 days of Aaron's note were quieter only by comparison. Crises leave behind ordinary work, and ordinary work is what actually changes a house. The collector received a permanent liner under Aaron's supervision. The garden was regraded at 2.7% away from the west wall. New copper downspouts fed restored drains. Aaron stitched the conservatory back to the main structure with stainless threaded rods and rebuilt the breakfast room windows using old jam profiles and new insulated glass. Buyers began to call before scaffolding came down. Mara's proximity, forced at first by permit sequencing and final inspections, settled into a pattern neither woman named. She arrived with plan revisions, coffee, drainage tables, and once a box of nitrile gloves because Aaron had run out. Their conversations were almost all factual. Header depth is short by 3/4. The sash weights came in. The city wants the vent detail on one page. Then one evening Mara said, "My father was a surveyor. He wrote numbers on napkins at dinner." Aaron set the tape against the jamb and said, "Mine laid block until 70. Mara nodded, as if the answer had weight she would account for later. The child was the bridge because children cross distances. Adults spend whole careers maintaining. On day 73, Luna sat on the restored front steps with Clover and watched Mara review punch list items on a clipboard. "Do you always look at broken houses?" she asked. Mara considered the pencil in her hand. "Only the ones worth keeping." Luna accepted that. Mama says this one was loud before. What does it sound like now? Luna leaned against the newel post Aaron had reset plumb by less than half a degree. Like when toast is done. Mara laughed once quietly and wrote nothing down for several seconds after. The sale happened in a title office on day 89. The buyers were a surgeon and an architect with enough technical literacy to recognize what had been done for real. Purchase price, $1.8 million even. Aaron had listed at $170 to create speed and let the work speak upward. After debt, labor, materials, taxes, and the emergency collector contribution the city eventually reimbursed in part, the number left to her was not fairy tale money. It was stability. The wire confirmation arrived at 1:26 p.m. Aaron looked at the screen, set the phone face down, and signed the final page exactly where the closer indicated. Restoration, when it finally came in official language, arrived in a corridor rather than a ceremony. 2 days after closing, Aaron was at City Hall filing the final as-built drawings when Olivia met her, outside the permit archives with a revised policy packet under her arm. The city had created a mandatory legacy record search before any condemnation action in bluff districts, an independent drainage verification requirement for emergency demolition recommendations, and a resident protection escalation that allowed owners without institutional financing to request field review before red tagging. It was the sort of structural change nobody celebrated and everybody needed. Olivia held out the packet. "We used your sequence," she said. Aaron glanced at the first page. Good. Olivia looked as though there were 3 more sentences available to her, and none that would improve the first. For what it's worth, the department should have listened earlier. Aaron closed the packet and handed it back. Then make sure the next one doesn't need to be louder than the building. Olivia nodded once. Natural diminishment is quieter than disgrace. She kept her title, lost the illusion that decisiveness could substitute for inquiry, and spent the rest of the season in site meetings where she listened longer before speaking. That was not punishment. It was geometry. The final inspection on Mercer had one loose end. A worker carrying salvage slate slipped 2 weeks before close and left a shallow cut across Aaron's palm that kept reopening whenever she gripped a drill. On the afternoon the sold sign came down, Mara found her in the empty kitchen unwrapping a bandage with her teeth because the other hand was full of cabinet screws. Sun from the harbor side moved cleanly across the floor. Aaron had lifted back into line 1/16 at a time. Mara took the bandage from her without asking. "Holds still," Mara said. Aaron held still. Mara cleaned the cut, wrapped it once, then again. Fingers steady and close over Aaron's wrist. They were both looking at the same thing, and not only the same thing. The white strip crossing the hand that had carried the house, the quiet kitchen. Luna in the next room explaining to Clover that sold did not mean taken away when the papers were yours. Mara secured the tape. Too tight? No. That's not a brave answer. It's a measurement. It's accurate. Mara's hand stayed a fraction longer than the bandage required. Then she let go and looked toward the window seat in the breakfast room, where Luna had arranged the rabbit beside a glass of orange juice with ice, a luxury she requested only on very good days. "She seems settled," Mara said. Aaron followed her gaze. "So do the walls." There it was then, the smallest release in the whole long season. The corner of Aaron's mouth moved. It was small, it was quiet. That evening, after the last contractor truck had gone, and the harbor light turned the restored glass at 47 Mercer Lane pale gold, Clover sat on the breakfast room window seat, with one gray ear folded neatly against the pane.